Chapter 1. The Girl at the Gate. The conference chamber of Redwood Academy, Charleston's proudest jewel, was heavy with perfume, polish, and pretense. Sunlight filtered through a row of tall, stained-glass windows, scattering reds and blues across the long mahogany table. Around it sat 10 members of the admissions board, their expressions a mixture of boredom and polite disdain. At the far end, Headmaster Percival Harrow leaned against his chair like a man accustomed to being obeyed. His hair was silver, his tie the deep green of wealth, and his fingers tapped the table in precise, impatient rhythms. And in the center of the room stood Maya Coleman. Her braids were pulled neatly back. Her blue dress, borrowed from her aunt, clung too tightly at the shoulders. Her shoes were scuffed but polished. She looked as if she had stepped into a world she did not belong to, and knew it. But her voice did not tremble. "I can speak 7 languages," she said. The air snapped. Conversations died. One of the board members, a balding man with spectacles, actually dropped his pen. A murmur rippled around the table like a slow current. 7. 7. One boy, seated off to the side with his crisply dressed mother, let out a laugh that sounded more like a bark. He whispered loudly enough for all to hear, "Maybe she means 7 words." His mother hushed him, though the corner of her lips curled. But it was Harrow who reacted most severely. "You can what?" he demanded, his baritone echoing across the room. The words were not a question, but an accusation. Maya clasped her hands in front of her. Her skin, warm bronze, caught the fractured sunlight. "I can speak 7 languages," she repeated, steady. There was a long pause. Then, slowly, a chuckle escaped one of the board members. Then another. Soon, a soft chorus of cruel laughter filled the room, genteel but unmistakable. 7, Harrow repeated, as if tasting the number. He rose from his chair, came around the desk, and circled Maya. His shoes clicked sharply against the floor. He glanced at the admissions folder in his hand, then at the girl before him. His expression tightened into something between disbelief and disdain. "Is this some kind of joke?" he asked. "No, sir." "Then tell me, child," Harrow pressed. "Where does someone like you learn 7 languages?" Her throat tightened. The answer she had always prepared, the story about a scholar father, a traveling professor, was on her tongue. But no, not this time. She swallowed hard, straightened her back. "My father," she said, "is the night watchman here. He works the front gate." The silence that followed was brutal. A cough broke it, sharp and deliberate. Someone chuckled. The boy with the mother muttered, "Figures." Harrow sneered. "So, the gatekeeper's daughter claims fluency in 7 languages." Maya said nothing. "We are wasting time," Harrow told the board. Then he turned back, lowering his voice until it cut like a blade. "Do you understand, Miss Coleman, that Redwood Academy is the most respected private institution in Charleston? We have educated senators' sons, CEOs' daughters, foreign diplomats, and you think you belong here?" "Yes, sir." Maya said quietly, "Then let me be perfectly clear." He leaned close, so close she could smell his cologne. "Admitting you would be a stain on this school's history, an embarrassment." There were no gasps this time, just nods. A satisfied hum, like bees around spoiled fruit. "And why is that?" Maya asked, her voice trembling, but not from fear. Harrow's mouth twisted. "Because you are not like the others. You are not from our world, and let us not pretend we don't all see what is in front of us." Her fingers curled. "Because I'm black?" she whispered. He did not answer. "Because I'm poor?" she pressed. His silence was confirmation enough. Finally, one woman on the board cleared her throat. "Mr. Harrow," but Harrow raised his hand. "Do not feign surprise. The girl should be grateful we even let her step foot inside." The words rang in Maya's ears. Something inside her, a stubbornness inherited from generations, rose like a tide. She thought of her father's rough hands that morning, packing her lunch with care. She thought of her grandmother humming hymns while braiding her hair. And she spoke. At first, the board smirked. Then the smirks faltered. Because Maya's voice began weaving itself into 7 different tongues. French, rolling and elegant. Spanish, sharp and musical. Swahili, rhythmic and proud. Mandarin, fluid as water. Italian, soft as song. Arabic, rich and deep. Finally English again, steady and sure. When she stopped, the silence was heavier than before. "I told you," she said. "I can speak 7 languages." Harrow's face hardened, his jaw working as though he'd bitten glass. He fumbled for his handkerchief. I suppose we might consider." "I didn't come to beg." Maya cut him off. "I came to learn." The boy who had laughed stared at his shoes. The woman who coughed studied the table. The silence in the room had shifted, no longer smug but shameful. Outside, Daniel Coleman leaned against the tall iron gate, his security cap tilted back, his boots dusty from the morning rounds. He looked tired, but his eyes lit when Maya stepped through the doors. "How'd it go, baby girl?" he asked. Maya smiled faintly, the ribbon in her braid catching the breeze. "They said I couldn't." "But you did." "Yes," she said softly, and they listened. They didn't hold hands walking back toward their battered old pickup truck. They didn't need to. The silence between them was filled with something far greater than victory. It was filled with dignity. That evening, their small duplex near the rail yards smelled faintly of cabbage from the neighbor's kitchen. The walls were thin, the floorboards creaked, but it was home. Daniel stirred a pot of grits on the stove, his security badge still pinned to his shirt. He set down a steaming bowl in front of Maya. "Eat, baby. Sweeten it with molasses. Helps when the day's been bitter." She stirred absently. "They laughed at me, Daddy." He nodded, sitting across from her, dust still clinging to his boots. "Folks laugh when they're scared or when they don't understand." "They said letting me in would stain their school." His jaw flexed. After a long pause, he reached into his pocket and pulled out an old pocket knife, dull with age. He placed it gently on the table. "This belonged to my father. He worked the shipyards. He told me, 'Don't cut nobody with it. Carry it so you remember you come from men who built ships, not from stains.'" Maya traced a finger along the metal. "Sometimes I wish I had a special father, a professor, a senator." Daniel's eyes held hers. "You got a special father. I may not teach in no ivory tower, but I built my daughter a mind stronger than any tower standing." Her eyes blurred with sudden heat. "I want them to see, Daddy," she whispered. "Not just me, but every kid who looks at that gate and thinks, that school isn't for me. I want them to know it can be." Daniel's gaze softened. "Then they're going to learn today." That night, Maya spread her notebooks across the table. French verbs, Japanese kanji, Swahili proverbs. Words wrapped around her like armor. Her father dozed in his chair, boots still on, the classifieds open in his lap. But Maya kept working, whispering words under her breath until her eyes ached. The next morning, the phone rang. Daniel answered. His reply was short, a single nod, then silence. "You start Monday," he told her. Maya froze mid-bite of her toast. "They said yes?" "They said they can't ignore what they saw." Her smile broke wide, then faltered. "He won't make it easy for me." Daniel shook his head. "No, but you don't need easy. You just need to remember who you are." Monday arrived like thunder. Redwood Academy's campus stretched beneath towering oaks, its manicured lawns lined with brick paths. Students in monogrammed blazers and polished loafers streamed through stone archways, their laughter chiming like bells. Maya stepped off the bus in second-hand shoes and a thrifted skirt, her backpack heavy with borrowed books and scribbled notes. Everywhere she walked, whispers followed. "Is that her? The gatekeeper's kid?" "She says she speaks 7 languages." The hush spread until it pressed against her like humidity. She kept walking. At the doorway of room 4C, she paused. 22 students sat in neat rows, their desks gleaming. The teacher, Miss Whitaker, blinked at Maya as though a ghost had entered. "You must be Maya Coleman." Her voice carried the faint edge of doubt. She gestured toward the back. "Take the empty seat." As Maya moved down the aisle, whispers chased her like shadows. "Really? The night watchman's daughter? Bet she just memorized a phrase book. 7? More like 7 lies." The words stuck like gum on her shoe. Annoying, dirty, impossible to scrape away. Maya sat quietly, opened her copy of To Kill a Mockingbird, and began reading. But her mind wasn't in Macomb County. It was back in the admissions chamber, standing tall while the world tried to shrink her. And in that moment, she made herself a promise. She would not shrink. Not here. Not ever again. Chapter 2. The First Crack. The cafeteria at Redwood Academy was as polished and intimidating as the rest of the school. Marble floors gleamed beneath the hanging chandeliers, and the air smelled faintly of rosemary chicken and money. Round tables dotted the room, filled with students in pressed uniforms. Their laughter floated upward like bubbles, effortless and cruel. Maya sat alone at the far edge, her peanut butter sandwich tasting like dust. She chewed slowly, staring at the cracks in the polished table, pretending not to notice the stares. "Is it true you're the gate guy's kid?" someone hissed from the next table. I heard she can talk to squirrels, another giggled. No, 7 words in 7 languages. Probably all curse words. The laughter that followed pricked her skin. Maya pressed her sandwich flat and wrapped it carefully back in its wax paper. If she didn't eat, maybe she wouldn't hear. But then a tray clattered down across from her. A girl with wild auburn hair and a mouth crowded with braces plopped into the seat, biting into a ham sandwich with careless abandon. You really speak 7 languages? She asked. Crumbs flying. Maya blinked, startled. Yes. The girl shrugged. Cool. I can barely pass English. Maya almost laughed. Almost. Instead, she studied the girl carefully. She didn't look like someone trying to mock her. Her braces flashed when she grinned, and her eyes, green, sharp, unafraid, watched Maya with interest, not judgment. I'm Ellie, she said, reaching across the table with a sticky hand. Maya hesitated, then shook it. Maya. Nice to meet you, polyglot. The word felt strange in the cafeteria air, but it warmed something in Maya's chest. For the first time that day, she didn't feel like a stain. But the warmth didn't last. By Wednesday, whispers had grown sharper, barbed with new cruelty. In algebra, 2 boys slid a folded paper onto Maya's desk. On the outside, scrawled in jagged pencil, were the words, mudblood. A slur stolen from a fantasy book, but pointed at her reality. Maya tore it neatly in half without a word, and returned to her equation. In history, her hand shot up first. The teacher's eyes slid past her, calling on anyone else. And in the cafeteria, the table where Ellie had sat beside her on Monday now bore a fresh, reserved sign. So Maya ate under the magnolia tree by the football field, her sandwich dry in her throat, her back pressed against the bark. She promised herself she wouldn't cry. Not here. Not now. On Friday, a summons came. Headmaster Harrow wants to see you, Miss Whitaker said curtly after class. Maya walked the long hallway toward his office, each step echoing like a drumbeat. The secretary barely glanced at her before motioning her in. Harrow stood by the tall window, hands clasped behind his back, surveying the manicured lawn below as though inspecting troops. Miss Coleman, he said without turning, I've received feedback. About what? Maya asked carefully. He turned slowly, his gaze sharp. About your presence here. It's causing disruption. I haven't broken any rules. No, but you've upset the balance. The balance? This school functions best when students know their place, when expectations are understood. Unfortunately, you continue to challenge that structure. Maya clenched her fists at her sides. With respect, sir, isn't that what learning is supposed to do? Harrow's smile was thin, venomous. This isn't a debate club, Miss Coleman. Redwood Academy is an institution of discipline and heritage. Intelligence does not equal belonging, especially when it doesn't wear the right uniform. So you're saying I don't belong here? I'm saying you are clever. That is clear. But cleverness is not the same as worth. Her throat burned. Are you threatening to expel me? Of course not, he said smoothly. But let's not pretend we didn't already. Stretch the rules to let you in. I earned my place. Perhaps, but don't expect everyone else to agree. He turned back to the window, dismissing her with silence. Maya stood frozen, heart pounding, palms slick with sweat. She swallowed hard, then left without another word. Outside the office, she exhaled slowly, trying to push the fire in her chest back into place. But the fire only grew. That afternoon in Language Lab, Miss Whitaker announced a new project, a paired assignment on global cultures. Each team will select a country, study its customs and language, and present to the class, she said briskly. Partners will be assigned. Maya's heart leapt. Finally, her chance to show them. Ethan and Olivia, Marcus and Caleb, Emily and Jackson. The list went on. And Maya. Miss Whitaker hesitated, eyes flicking up with the faintest glint of disdain. You'll be working alone. A few students snickered. Maya's jaw tightened. May I choose any country? I suppose, the teacher said. As long as your pronunciation is authentic. The edge in her voice was sharp, unmistakable. I'll present in Swahili, Maya replied. The room went silent. That night, Maya sat at the kitchen table, notebooks spread in a fortress around her. Her father was on a double shift. The only sounds were the hum of the old refrigerator and the occasional bark of a dog outside. She practiced until her tongue ached. Jina langu ni Maya, she whispered. Nafurahi kuzungumza nanyi leo. My name is Maya. I am happy to speak with you today. She repeated it again and again until her accent softened, her rhythm sharpened, Her voice grew steady, but at midnight she paused. Her eyes swept the small kitchen, the cracked linoleum, the faded curtains, her grandmother's picture on the wall. A lump rose in her throat. "Why am I the only one who has to prove everything?" she whispered. There was no answer, only the steady tick of the kitchen clock. Monday came. Maya stood at the front of the classroom, her notes trembling only slightly in her hands. She spoke in Swahili with precision, with strength. Her voice carried through the room like a clear bell. When she finished, silence followed. Not mockery, not laughter, stillness. Then, from somewhere in the middle row, a pair of hands clapped, then another, then another. Miss Whitaker didn't clap, but she didn't stop it either. And when Maya met her teacher's eyes, she saw it, just a flicker. Not approval, not yet. But recognition. It was enough. The next morning, Maya found a folded piece of paper on her desk. Her stomach tightened. She braced for another slur, another scribble meant to wound. But this note was different. The handwriting was careful cursive, sealed with blue tape. "You were amazing yesterday." "I didn't even know Swahili was real." "Don't stop talking." Maya looked around the room. No one glanced her way. Students buzzed about math quizzes and volleyball practice as though nothing had happened. She folded the note carefully and slipped it into her book. Something had shifted. At lunch, Maya headed for her usual magnolia tree. But before she could sit, footsteps approached. Ellie, auburn hair gleaming in the sun, stood with a hesitant smile. "Mind if I join you?" Maya blinked, then nodded. "Go ahead." They ate quietly for a while, Ellie picking at her sandwich, Maya biting into her apple. "You're really something, you know," Ellie said finally. 7 languages. I can't even say croissant without sounding like a donkey." Maya laughed before she could stop herself. A real laugh, sharp and bright. And just like that, the wall around her cracked. Just a little. That week an announcement came. "The annual Founders' Day speech contest will be held next Wednesday," Miss Whitaker declared. "As always, the winner will present before the entire student body, staff, and board." The room buzzed with excitement. It was one of Redwood Academy's oldest traditions. Winners were usually legacy kids, the ones whose families' names were carved on plaques in the portrait hall. Maya didn't raise her hand. She didn't say a word. But the thought burrowed into her mind and refused to leave. That night at the kitchen table, she sat staring at a blank page. "You thinking about entering?" Daniel asked, setting down his lunchbox. "I'm thinking about it," Maya muttered. He chuckled. "That means yes. They don't want someone like me on that stage." He sat across from her, folding his hands. "Maybe not, but that's exactly why you need to stand there." Her pen hovered. Then the words began to flow. She wrote about honor, not the kind engraved in crests and trophies, but the kind found in showing up even when no one wanted you. She wrote about truth, about being underestimated, about belonging when the world said no. By morning, her speech was done. When she handed it to Miss Whitaker, the teacher blinked in surprise. "I'll review it," she said. "Submissions close Friday." "Thank you," Maya replied. By Thursday, whispers spread. The gatekeeper's daughter had entered the contest. On Friday, the list of accepted entries was posted. Maya scanned it with a pounding heart. Olivia Harris, Jackson Lee, Caleb Thornhill. And at the bottom, Maya Coleman, the quiet kind of honor. Her breath caught. Ellie leaned close, whispering, "You're in?" Maya nodded slowly, staring at her name until the letters blurred. She was in. Chapter 3. The quiet kind of honor. The week before the Founders' Day contest, Redwood Academy buzzed like a hive. Everywhere Maya went, she heard her name. Not directly, not kindly, but as a whisper at the edges of conversations. Can you believe she entered? It's embarrassing, really. Founders' Day isn't for outsiders. She'll choke. Just wait. Even teachers looked at her differently, some with thinly veiled pity, others with irritation, as though her mere presence was an inconvenience. Maya ignored them as best she could. She kept her head high, her notebooks full, her voice steady, but every step through the halls felt heavier than the last. At night, she sat at the kitchen table, her speech spread before her in neat handwritten pages. Her father, Daniel, would sit across from her, peeling an orange or rubbing his tired eyes. "Read it again," he'd say, no matter how many times he had already heard it. And she would. Honor, she wrote, wasn't about trophies or plaques. It was about showing up when no one wanted you to. About doing the work even when no one called your name. about refusing to shrink when whispers tried to make you smaller. Daniel would listen, nodding, pride glowing in his tired face. "That's my girl," he'd say softly. But when Maya went to bed, slipping the speech beneath her pillow, doubt crept in. She could still hear Harrow's voice, sharp and disdainful. "You don't belong here." On Wednesday morning, the school auditorium hummed with anticipation. Students filed in wearing their best uniforms. Teachers lined the aisles. A few board members, polished, distant, sat in the front row. The stage glowed under amber lights, the Redwood Academy crest gleaming like a crown above it. Backstage, Maya's hands shook as she held her folder. Ellie appeared beside her, slightly out of breath, clutching a paper bag. "Banana," she whispered. Maya blinked. "What?" "My mom swears by it. Potassium calms nerves. Take it." Maya laughed softly, despite the storm inside her. She peeled the banana and took a bite. It tasted like glue, but the gesture steadied her. "Thanks." "Don't thank me yet," Ellie said. "Go win." The speeches began. Caleb Thornhill went first, his voice smooth, confident, full of words like heritage and legacy. His family name carried weight. His grandfather's portrait hung in the portrait hall. The applause was long, polite, predictable. One by one, other students followed. Their speeches gleamed with polish but rang hollow in Maya's ears. Finally, the announcer called, "Our final speaker today is Maya Coleman, with her speech entitled The Quiet Kind of Honor." A hush spread through the room. Maya stepped into the light. Her knees trembled, but her voice did not. "When people speak of honor in schools like this one," she began, "they often think of trophies, plaques, portraits of men with stern faces and polished shoes. But I have learned that honor is quieter than that." She paused. The silence held. "Honor is getting up every morning to walk into a room where no one wants you. It's doing your work when no one calls on you. It's refusing to shrink when whispers try to erase you." A ripple moved through the crowd. "Honor is what my father shows when he fixes gates. No one notices. No one thanks him. But he opens doors others walk through without a second thought. He taught me that dignity doesn't come from titles. It comes from knowing who you are." Her eyes flicked toward Headmaster Harrow in the front row. His arms were crossed, his face unreadable. "This school was not built for someone like me. The stage was never meant to hold my voice. But here I am, not because I was given a place, but because I refused to leave quietly." A stunned hush filled the auditorium. And if honor means anything today, let it mean this: that the quietest student can carry the loudest truth, that we are not stains on the fabric. We are threads, strong ones, that hold history together. She lowered her pages. The silence that followed was thick, waiting. Then a clap. One, then another. Then a wave of applause, rising like a storm. Students stood. Teachers clapped. Even a few board members. Ellie whistled so loudly, Maya nearly laughed. Only Harrow remained still, his face carved from stone. But at the back of the room, near the exit, Daniel stood in his security uniform, cap in happing with both hands proud and loud. Backstage, Maya sank into a folding chair, her hands shaking at last. Ellie barreled in, grinning. "You nailed it." "You think so?" Maya asked, her voice small. "You didn't just speak," Ellie said. "You made them listen." Just then, Miss Whitaker entered. Her expression was unreadable. "Your speech will be printed in next month's alumni journal," she said. Maya blinked. "Really?" "It was honest," the teacher said. "That takes courage." She hesitated, then added quietly, "Not everyone will like you after today, but no one will be able to say you don't belong." Maya nodded, her throat tight. It was enough. The glow lasted 2 days. By Monday, the whispers had returned, this time sharper, dipped in poison. She made it all about herself. She guilt-tripped them. Her dad's a janitor. What's honorable about that? Even teachers seemed cooler. Miss Whitaker avoided her eyes. Group projects mysteriously left her name off the lists. Only Ellie remained steadfast, sitting under the magnolia tree with her. "They're talking about you," Ellie said, frowning. "I know." "You were amazing. Why can't they see that?" "Because I wasn't supposed to win," Maya said quietly. "Not in front of the board. Not in front of Harrow." Ellie bit her lip. "He didn't clap. I noticed." Maya looked at the rustling branches above them. "That's all right. I didn't speak for him." That afternoon she was summoned again. Harrow's office was colder this time. He sat behind his desk, a stack of letters at his side. "These," he said, tapping them, "are complaints from parents, donors, alumni." Maya stood tall. "About what?" About your speech. They believe it was inappropriate, political, disruptive. It was honest. That's your opinion. It's also true. Harrow finally looked at her. His eyes were sharp as knives. You are clever, Miss Coleman, but cleverness can be dangerous. Your place here is still conditional. A beat passed. Maya's heart pounded, but her voice was calm. I understand. Good. You're dismissed. She left with her fists clenched and her palms slick, but her head unbowed. That night, at the kitchen table, Daniel sorted through unpaid bills, his brow heavy. They're trying to make me disappear, Maya said softly. Who? Harrow. The board. Everyone who thinks I don't belong. Daniel leaned back slowly, setting the bills aside. You want to disappear? No. Then don't. She met his eyes, her throat tight. But they're threatening to take my place away. Then make it impossible for them to take it, he said. Maya frowned. How? Be undeniable. Not loud, not flashy. Just undeniable. Work harder, show more, every day. She stared at him. Even if they'll never accept me? You're not here to be accepted. You're here to learn, to grow. And maybe, he said softly, to open the gate for the next kid behind you. The quiet between them settled like an oath. The next morning, Maya arrived before the bell. She went straight to the library, checked out books on rhetoric, history, resistance. By lunch, she had outlined a new essay. By the end of the day, she had submitted a research proposal to the student journal. She began tutoring younger students in French after school. She helped clean the language lab. She corrected the teacher's Swahili pronunciation gently, without condescension. Day by day, her presence grew harder to ignore. By week's end, a younger boy she tutored slipped her a note scrawled in blue crayon. Thank you, Miss Maya. Even Miss Whitaker gave her a small, reluctant nod after class. The whispers didn't vanish, but they softened, because Maya Coleman was no longer just visible. She was undeniable. Chapter 4. Cracks in the Wall. November settled over Charleston like a damp quilt. Rain smeared the windows of Redwood Academy, and the sprawling oaks shed their leaves in brittle copper waves. The air smelled of wet stone and chalk dust, and inside the academy, the silence around Maya Coleman had thickened into something sharper. She felt it in every classroom. Miss Whitaker's eyes skimmed past her raised hand. Group assignments forgot her name on the roster. Even in the cafeteria, the kids who had once clapped now turned away, trays balanced like shields. Only Ellie stayed. At lunch under the magnolia tree, Ellie pushed peas around her plate and frowned. They're freezing you out, she said. I know. It's stupid. Maya shrugged, biting into her apple. Doesn't matter. I'm not here to be liked. Yeah, but you should at least be allowed to exist without people acting like you're contagious. Maya smiled faintly. Existing's the part I'm good at. Ellie rolled her eyes. You're impossible. But she stayed, and that Maya realized was no small thing. The real test came 2 weeks later. A flyer appeared on the bulletin board outside the library. Its title was almost laughable, Diversity and Inclusion Committee Seeking Student Representatives. Maya stared at it for a long moment. Feels like a trap, she muttered. Ellie appeared at her elbow, holding 2 cups of coffee she'd smuggled from home. Or a door, she said. Maybe one you kicked open without realizing. Maya gave her a look. You sound like my dad. Smart man, Ellie said, sipping. That afternoon, Maya filled out the application. She didn't tell anyone, not even Daniel. A week later, she was summoned again. Harrow's office smelled of leather and disapproval. But this time, he wasn't alone. Vice Principal Mrs. Rivera sat beside him, clipboard balanced on her knee, her dark eyes sharp. Miss Coleman, Harrow said, motioning stiffly toward the chair, we've reviewed your request. It wasn't a request, Maya said evenly. It was an application. Yes, well, he said, lips thin. Be that as it may, this committee is new, sensitive, and some board members are concerned it may stir unnecessary conflict. Conflict? Maya asked. Or reflection? Harrow's jaw tightened. Rivera leaned forward. I believe, she said carefully, that a student like Maya may bring valuable insight, particularly if this school truly wishes to make progress. Harrow shot her a glance, sharp enough to cut paper. Maya sat straighter. If this committee is just for appearances, I'm not interested. But if it's meant to be real, meant to change something, I want in. The silence that followed was heavy. Finally, Harrow leaned back, steepling his fingers. We will allow your participation, but with discretion. No speeches, no newsletters. Keep it internal. Maya rose. I'll be respectful. but I won't be silent." She left before he could reply. The first meeting was held in an unused art room in the north wing. The windows were streaked with rain, and the smell of old paint clung to the air. Only 5 students showed up. 2 seniors, a shy sophomore, Ellie, and Maya. Mrs. Rivera sat at the front, folding her hands like a conductor about to begin. "Thank you for coming," she said. "This committee is new. The board approved it reluctantly, so tread carefully, but we will begin." The conversation was awkward at first. Suggestions about textbook updates, about cultural electives. Then Maya spoke. She told them about the whispers, about the names she'd been called in her first week, about Harrow's office and his quiet threats, about giving a speech that made the school clap and then made it hate her for it. The room shifted. The seniors, Simone, tall and commanding, and Henry, nervous but sincere, leaned forward. "I saw your speech," Simone said quietly. "I didn't clap." Maya's eyes flicked up. "I should have," Simone added. "I want to help now." Maya exhaled slowly. For the first time, she didn't feel like she was explaining herself. She felt like she was laying bricks, foundations. The weeks that followed were messy, ambitious, impossible. The committee drafted a proposal. New language in the student handbook. Anonymous reporting for harassment. Optional cultural electives. Maya stayed late, typing until her fingers cramped. She met with teachers after hours, gathering support. She even convinced the janitorial staff, her father's friends, to sign a letter backing the initiative. Word spread. Some students mocked it, calling it the Janitors Club. Others rolled their eyes. Performative. Won't change anything. But whispers of support came too. Notes slipped into lockers, quiet thank yous from kids she didn't know. The cracks in the wall were widening. Then came the note. Maya opened her locker one Tuesday to find an envelope wedged inside. For a moment, her heart lifted. Maybe another thank you. But when she unfolded the paper, the words burned. "You'll never be one of us. Keep pretending." Her fingers tightened. She crumpled the note into a hard ball and dropped it into the trash. She didn't cry. That night, Daniel found her asleep at the kitchen table, head resting on a stack of proposals. He draped a blanket over her shoulders and said nothing. The day of the board presentation arrived with heavy skies. Maya wore her best navy dress, freshly pressed by her grandmother. Daniel sat in the back, his uniform crisp, his boots polished. Ellie's mother came too, whispering prayers under her breath. Mrs. Rivera introduced them. Simone began, her voice strong. Henry followed, his hands trembling but his words clear. Then Maya stepped forward. She faced the board, her speech steady. "We are not asking to erase this school's history. We are asking to make room for more stories. If Redwood Academy teaches honor, then honor must include truth. And the truth is we haven't been listening." Her voice didn't waver. "We are here. We've always been here. It's time the walls reflected that." When she finished, the silence was thick. Not hostile, not dismissive. Just heavy. The kind of silence that comes before something begins. That evening, under the dim kitchen light, Daniel stirred a pot of chili while Maya scribbled notes for her next article. "You shook them today," he said, not looking up. "Maybe." He turned, spoon in hand, eyes proud. "No maybe about it. They'll never look at that school the same again." Maya smiled faintly, and for the first time since stepping through Redwood's gates, she believed him. Chapter 5. Beneath the floorboards, December arrived with brittle winds and skies the color of slate. Redwood Academy's stone walls seemed to bristle against the cold, radiators clanking in stubborn protest. Students hurried across campus in wool coats and polished boots, their breath fogging in the frosty air. But Maya Coleman no longer felt the cold in her bones the way she used to. Something inside her had shifted. The Diversity Committee's first proposal had reached the board, and though no immediate changes had been announced, whispers rippled through the school. Some students snickered, others glared, but just a few, began to nod when she passed. Quiet acknowledgments in hallways where silence used to reign. It was enough to keep her going. Until the leak. It started with a buzz in the cafeteria one Thursday. Phones glowed brighter than the overhead lights. Screenshots were passed from hand to hand. By third period, Ellie stormed into the library, her face flushed. "You need to see this," she hissed, dragging Maya into an empty classroom. She thrust her phone forward. The screen showed a private staff group chat. Sarcasm bled from every line. Social justice babysitting. Maybe the janitor's kid should focus on mopping, not mentoring. plaque princess thinks she's saving the school. Maya stared at the words. They blurred, sharpened, blurred again. Ellie's voice shook. They're teachers, Maya. Teachers. Maya turned the phone off. Her face was still, her voice calm. They're scared, she said softly. Ellie blinked. That's your reaction? That's all this is, Maya said. Fear. Fear of being forced to see what they never wanted to see. She slipped the phone back into Ellie's hand, and if they're scared, it means I've already changed something. But that night, at the kitchen table, she said little. Daniel noticed the heaviness in her silence. All right, baby girl, he asked, setting his fork down. They're not just students this time, Maya said quietly. It's staff. Daniel leaned back, eyes narrowing. Doesn't make them right. They're trying to make me small again. He reached across the table, his rough hand covering hers. You know what small people hate most? He asked. What? When the thing they tried to bury grows taller than they ever imagined. Maya held on to those words like armor. The next morning, she carried printed screenshots straight to Mrs. Rivera's office. Rivera read them slowly, her face tightening. I assume you know this isn't official school communication, she said carefully. But they're teachers, Maya replied. I know, and I'll bring it to the board. Maya hesitated. What will they do? They'll discuss, maybe issue a statement. Rivera's sigh was heavy. They'll form a subcommittee. That's what they always do. That's not enough, Maya said firmly. Rivera studied her. Then what do you want? I want the students to know the truth. Not the gossip. Not the whispers. The truth. Rivera's eyes narrowed. Are you prepared for what might come of that? I've already lived it, Maya said. 2 weeks later, the auditorium doors opened to half a student body buzzing with curiosity. Maya stood at the podium, a single sheet of paper in her hands. Redwood Academy teaches us to value honor, discipline, and truth, she began. Her voice carried steady, clear. But those values mean nothing if we only protect them when it's convenient. The murmurs quieted. In the past month, I've been praised publicly and mocked privately. I've been awarded and attacked, and I've realized something important. What scares people most is not the noise. It's the clarity. She lifted the printouts. These are not rumors. These are the words of people who are meant to teach us, and I am not here to punish them. I am here to remind us that silence is not safety. Silence is complicity. When we choose to ignore prejudice, we become its echo, and Redwood deserves better than that. The silence afterward was different from any she had felt before. Charged, electric. She stepped off the stage without waiting for applause. The fallout came swift. That evening, the screenshots hit the local news. One teacher quietly resigned. Another issued a public apology. A third was placed on leave. Under pressure, Harrow released a statement condemning divisive rhetoric among staff. For the first time in Redwood's long, polished history, the school was being forced to look in the mirror. But Maya didn't feel triumph. She felt justice. Cold. Necessary. That night, Daniel sat beside her in their living room, the news flickering across the TV. Maya's face appeared blurred in the broadcast, her name mentioned with cautious respect. You've shaken the tree, he said quietly. Maya nodded, her voice low. Let's hope something good falls from it. The next week, a custodian named Mr. Dorsey pulled Maya aside. He was a quiet man in his 60s, with a limp in one leg and eyes that carried too many stories. You got a minute, Miss Coleman? He asked. She followed him down to the west wing, where the floorboards creaked and the air smelled of dust. He stopped before a locked door, keys jingling in his hand. This used to be part of the servants' quarters, and he said, not on the maps they hand out now. Most folks forgot about it. He unlocked the door. The hinges groaned. Inside was darkness. Dust motes swirled in the light of Maya's phone flashlight. Wooden shelves lined the walls, stacked with boxes. At the far end stood an old filing cabinet, rusted but intact. What is this? Maya whispered. Mr. Dorsey pulled down a box and opened it. Inside were notebooks, photographs, letters, all labeled with names she didn't recognize. These are records of the black staff who worked here during the segregation years, he said softly. Groundskeepers, kitchen staff, nannies, none of them ever made it into the official archives. Maya's chest tightened. She lifted a leather-bound notebook. On the first page, faded ink read, May 1948. James Alton, grounds crew, paid 42 cents an hour. Denied access to staff lounge. Page after page told the same story. Names, wages, denials, insults. They were buried, Maya said, her throat thick. That's what history does when no one's watching, Mr. Dorsey replied. Maya clutched the notebook to her chest. This can't stay hidden, he smiled faintly. Didn't think you'd say anything else. For the next week, Maya and Ellie cataloged the materials, their fingers black with dust. Simone helped digitize. The committee worked late into the evenings, piecing together forgotten lives from scraps of paper. There were love letters between staff who weren't allowed to marry on school grounds. Complaint forms never answered. A drawing from a janitor's son of the academy as he dreamed it could be, complete with a hall of portraits that looked nothing like the one that currently existed. The exhibit plan formed in Maya's mind like lightning, beneath the floorboards. A gallery of truth. She pitched it to the administration as a historical installation, a way to honor the hidden labor that had built Redwood. Harrow's silence during the presentation was deafening. When she finished, he leaned back, fingers steepled. You are proposing we reveal that this school knowingly suppressed these records. I'm proposing we tell the truth, Maya said. His paws stretched like wire. Then I will not stop it, he said finally. But I will not endorse it either. That's enough, Maya replied, because she didn't need permission to remember. The launch of Beneath the Floorboards was set for late January. Flyers went up. Local journalists began calling. Alumni buzzed. Students whispered too. Some mocked it, sneering about Maya's pity museum. But others lingered at the posters, reading the names of workers they had never heard of. On the day of the unveiling, the East Gallery filled with students, teachers, staff, even a few wary board members. Maya stood at the podium, the leather-bound notebook open in her hands. I found these stories under dust and silence, she said, but they were never gone. They waited, waiting for someone to listen. Her voice trembled, then steadied. Agnes Cooper, housekeeper, 1950. They say I can't eat at the same table, but I know this school better than they ever will. One day someone will say my name out loud. Maya looked up. Agnes, we are saying it now. The applause that followed wasn't loud, but it was deep. It sounded like recognition. After the crowd thinned, Harrow approached her quietly. His face was pale, rigid. I underestimated you, he said flatly. Maya met his gaze without flinching. No, you underestimated the power of truth. For the first time, Harrow said nothing, and that silence was the sweetest sound Maya had ever heard. Chapter 6. The Echo Beyond the Walls. The first snow of January fell like powdered glass over Redwood Academy, coating the lawns in a cold, white hush. Students trudged through it with scarves pulled high, boots crunching on the pathways. The stone towers of the school looked older, almost fragile, against the winter sky. But inside the East Gallery, the new exhibit, Beneath the Floorboards, glowed with life. Students lingered there between classes. Some traced the engraved names with their fingertips. Others whispered as if they were walking through a chapel. For the first time, Redwood's silence wasn't indifference. It was reverence. Maya stood in the gallery one late afternoon watching a freshman boy stare at a photograph of Agnes Cooper. He mouthed the words on her plaque before walking away quietly, his head lowered in thought. Maya's chest tightened with something she hadn't felt in months. Hope. The recognition came quickly. 2 weeks after the unveiling, Maya opened her locker to find a cream-colored envelope tucked neatly inside. Her name, handwritten in elegant script, covered the front. She tore it open. Miss Maya Coleman, we are pleased to inform you that you have been selected to receive Redwood Academy's inaugural Civic Voice Award in recognition of your leadership, courage, and commitment to truth. You will be formally honored at the February assembly. Maya froze, reading the words again. They had tried to erase her. Now they were forced to acknowledge her. She didn't cry. She didn't even smile. She just stood, breathing, the paper trembling slightly in her hands. That night, she showed Daniel. He chuckled softly, pride warming his tired eyes. Didn't I tell you? Truth grows taller than anything they try to bury. But Redwood's walls never let joy go untouched. Within days, an anonymous blog post appeared online. The headline read, Janitor's Daughter Given Sympathy Award, Redwood Bows to Politics. It spread like wildfire. Screenshots were passed between phones and hallways. The comments dripped venom. She guilt-tripped the board. Everything's about race now. She's lucky, that's all. By Friday, the whispers had grown thick as fog. She doesn't deserve it. It's just politics. They're using her for PR. Maya heard every word. At lunch, Ellie leaned forward, anger burning in her eyes. "You need to post a response. Shut this down." Maya shook her head. "If they've already decided what I am, no amount of explaining will change it. But it's not fair." "No," Maya said softly, staring at her apple. "But it's real." On Monday, Mrs. Rivera summoned Maya to her office. "I assume you've seen the blog," Rivera said gently. "Yes." "It's inappropriate and we're investigating the source. The board is considering legal action." "I don't want it taken down," Maya said. Rivera frowned. "What do you mean?" "I want it addressed. Publicly. Not just about me, about the climate here, about the bullying, the silence. If the board is serious, they need to say it." Rivera studied her, then gave a faint nod. "I'll bring it to them." That Friday, a printed bulletin appeared in every homeroom. The Redwood Board of Trustees unequivocally condemns personal attacks against any student based on background, family status, or race. Discourse is welcome. Harassment is not. All students deserve safety and respect. It didn't name her. It wasn't perfect. But it was a start. The February assembly brimmed with anticipation. Students filled the grand auditorium, their breath fogging slightly in the cold air. Teachers lined the walls. Even a few parents had gathered. Maya sat in the front row, her navy dress pressed crisp, her father's security badge gleaming faintly under the lights. When her name was called, the applause was louder than she expected. Some clapped out of politeness, some because they meant it, but all clapped. Principal Harrow stood at the podium, his expression unreadable. He held a small plaque in his hand. "Congratulations, Miss Coleman," he said as she stepped onto the stage. Maya took the plaque, her eyes steady on his. "Thank you," she said evenly, "for following through." He nodded once, tight-lipped, and stepped aside. Maya stood at the microphone for a brief moment, not to give a speech, but to look. To see the faces that once sneered, now forced to witness. Some blank, some reluctant, some open. And in the back row, Daniel clapping with both hands, proud and loud. That night, Maya placed the plaque on their kitchen table. She stared at it for a long time, tracing the engraved letters with her finger. Then she noticed something taped to the back. A small folded note. "Justice doesn't knock. It waits. And you open the door. Thank you." There was no signature. She folded it carefully, tucking it into her notebook beside her mother's old journal. Weeks passed. February gave way to March, the snow melting into muddy grass. Redwood hummed with its usual rituals, midterms, debate tournaments, spring sports. But Maya felt something new in the air. The silence around her wasn't empty anymore. It was watchful, curious. One morning, Mrs. Rivera intercepted her outside the language lab, handing her another cream envelope sealed with a wax stamp. "What is this?" Maya asked. "Open it." Inside was a letter printed on crisp official paper. United States Department of Education, Office of Civil Rights and Inclusion. Maya's breath caught. "Dear Miss Coleman, we have followed your courageous efforts at Redwood Academy. In honor of your advocacy for equity in education, we invite you to speak at our annual Youth Inclusion Summit in Washington, D.C. Your voice can inspire meaningful national dialogue. You will have 15 minutes to address students, educators, and policymakers from across the country." Maya's hands trembled. "Washington," she whispered. Rivera smiled. "They want you to represent the future." News spread fast. Ellie nearly screamed when she heard. Simone organized mock Q&A sessions. Committee members compiled research and anecdotes. But Daniel was quiet. Too quiet. The night before the trip, Maya found him sitting on the porch, staring at the stars. "You all right, Dad?" she asked, sitting beside him. He nodded slowly. "I keep thinking about your mother." Maya's chest tightened. "I wish she could see this." "She does," Daniel said softly. "Every time you speak, baby girl, I swear I hear her voice in you." Maya blinked back tears. "I never wanted any of this. I know, but now that it's here, you carry it well." He squeezed her hand. "Just remember, when you speak, you don't have to be anyone else. You've already done the hard part. Just tell the truth." 2 days later, Maya stood behind a polished podium in a grand hall in Washington. Rows of educators, students, and policymakers stretched before her. Cameras streamed live. Her name glowed on a banner overhead. She wore her navy dress, simple but sharp. Her braids were tied back. Her hands gripped the podium, steady. "I come from a place where words were often not enough," she began. Her voice rang clear. "Where being smart wasn't always safe. Where speaking 7 languages didn't protect me from being told I didn't belong." The room hushed. But I learned something at Redwood Academy. Silence is not neutrality, and visibility is not power, unless we use it. She paused, eyes locking with the audience. When I arrived at Redwood, I was nearly turned away at the gates. Not because of my grades, not because of my effort, but because someone looked at me and decided I didn't belong. And yet here I am, not because I demanded space, but because I built it. Applause rippled, then grew, thunderous and sustained. Afterward, officials lined up to shake her hand. Reporters pressed questions. Students asked for photos. Maya answered each with calm humility, always circling back to her message. Justice is not a destination. It is a practice, a decision we make every day. When she returned home, Daniel was waiting at the bus stop, arms wide. They stood, Maya whispered as he hugged her, the whole room. I knew they would, he said, voice thick. Back at Redwood, a framed photo of Maya at the summit appeared in the main office. Beneath it, a brass plaque read, Maya Coleman, student, speaker, catalyst. Students stopped to look. Some smiled. None ignored it. Because Maya's voice had left the walls of Redwood and entered history. Chapter 7. Walls that remember spring crept slowly into Redwood Academy. The snow receded, leaving the lawns damp and raw, dotted with the first stubborn crocuses. The air smelled faintly of thawing earth and old stone. Students traded wool coats for lighter jackets, though the chill lingered in the shadows of the courtyards. For Maya, the season carried a different weight. Her speech in Washington had been streamed across the country. At Redwood, a framed photo of her hung in the main office. She was no longer just a student. She was a symbol. But symbols have a way of unsettling the walls that try to contain them. One evening in early April, Maya sat cross-legged on her dorm bed, her mother's scarf tied loosely around her neck, when her phone buzzed. A message from Mrs. Rivera lit the screen. Subject: Urgent board vote. Maya, there will be a closed-door vote this Friday regarding changes to the Portrait Hall expansion. Several board members are attempting to halt further additions. It appears your recent visibility has triggered concerns about redefining tradition. I wanted you to know. Our Maya stared at the message. Her stomach tightened. The Portrait Hall wasn't just a project. It was proof. Proof that Redwood could change. Proof that silence could be broken. And now they wanted to stop it. She forwarded the email to Ellie and Simone with a single line. We need to talk. Tonight. By dusk, the three of them huddled in the committee's cramped art room, papers and notebooks strewn across the paint-splattered table. Simone slapped the table with her palm. We can't let them erase it. We fought too hard. Ellie nodded, pacing. They'll say it's not personal, just about tradition. But it is personal. It always is. Maya leaned forward, her voice steady. They're not just voting on walls. They're voting on whether people like us are allowed to be remembered here. Silence settled over the room. Simone's jaw tightened. So what's the plan? We make them see, Maya said. The days leading up to the vote blurred into a storm. Maya drafted a letter to every board member, each one personal, each one pointed. She told them about the janitors who opened doors no one thanked them for, about the groundskeepers who patched leaks in the dead of night, about her mother, Lena Johnson, who once organized Redwood's first library system but was never given credit. She used to whisper to me, Maya wrote, one day they'll know your name. Maya ended each letter with the same line. Tradition is not weakened by truth. It is strengthened by it. Ellie organized a petition. Simone rallied alumni on social media. Within 3 days, they had hundreds of signatures, including from graduates who admitted they had once felt invisible in Redwood's shadowed halls. On Friday morning, they gathered in the marble corridor outside the boardroom. Students lined the walls, sitting cross-legged with books in their laps, silent but firm. The atmosphere was heavy with expectation, like the air before a storm. Maya sat among them, her back against the cold wall, eyes closed. She didn't pray for a miracle. She prayed for courage. The vote took nearly 2 hours. When the doors finally creaked open, Mrs. Rivera stepped into the hall. Her face was unreadable. Everyone stood. She looked at Maya and gave a single nod. It passed, she said softly. 6-3. The expansion continues. For a moment, the silence broke into cheers, shouts, clapping. Ellie cried openly. Simone punched the air. Students hugged. But Maya just stood still, blinking. It passed, she repeated, almost to herself. Later, Mr. Rivera pulled Maya aside. Her voice was low, conspiratorial. "One of the board members told me something after the vote," she said. "She said your letter reminded her of her grandmother, a woman who cleaned classrooms for decades without ever having her name on anything." Maya swallowed hard, her throat tight. "Your truth," Rivera added, "did what shouting never could." That night, back in their small duplex, Daniel pulled a dusty photo album from the top shelf of the closet. They sat together on the living room floor, flipping through yellowed pages. There was her mother, sorting books. A younger Daniel sweeping snow off redwood steps. A tiny Maya in pigtails grinning before the school gates. "She always wanted you to know your worth," Daniel said, his voice thick, "even when others tried to define it for you." Maya turned a page and found a photo she'd never seen before, her mother standing in front of the old library, a notebook tucked under her arm, her eyes bright but weary. "She used to whisper to me," Maya said quietly. "One day they'll know your name." Daniel put his arm around her shoulders. "They do now." But Maya wasn't finished. The next morning, she drafted a new proposal. Not for walls, but for futures. The Lena Johnson Quiet Strength Scholarship, an annual award for a student from a working-class family who showed courage, service, and resilience, the very qualities Redwood once ignored. "This time," Maya wrote in her proposal, "we will not only remember the past, we will invest in the future." When she presented it to the committee, there was no hesitation. Simone nodded firmly. Ellie grinned through tears. Even students who had once scoffed leaned forward, listening. When it reached the board, there was less resistance than expected. Perhaps they were weary. Perhaps they were learning. The proposal passed. Maya's mother's name would not just hang on a wall. It would open doors every year. The day the scholarship was announced, Redwood's courtyard buzzed with something different. Not mockery, not resistance, but quiet awe. Students clustered around the bulletin board where the announcement was posted. Some whispered. Some simply read in silence. Maya passed by with her books in her arms. She didn't linger. She didn't need to. Because her mother's name was there now. Etched not in dust, but in promise. And Redwood could never take it back. That evening, Maya sat at her desk, writing in the back of her notebook. The page where her mother's journal had once ended in a blank space. She wrote, "You were right, Mama. They know your name, and they always will." She set down her pen, closed the notebook, and let the silence wash over her. Not the silence of erasure, the silence of remembrance. Chapter 8. Beneath the dust. Late April brought restless winds to Redwood Academy. Cherry blossoms burst along the main quad, their petals drifting like pale confetti. But the campus felt unsettled. The students sensed it, something beneath the polished rituals, the neat lawns, the orderly assemblies. Maya felt it too. One evening, as she left the library carrying a stack of books, a voice called softly behind her. "Miss Coleman, got a minute?" It was Mr. Dorsey, the elderly custodian who had first shown her the forgotten storage room. His voice carried the weight of secrets. "Come with me," he said, his eyes darting down the empty hall. He led her through the west wing, where the floorboards still creaked and the plaster walls smelled faintly of mildew. They stopped before another locked door, nearly hidden behind a row of unused lockers. "What's in there?" Maya asked. "History. Mystery," Dorsey replied, handing her an old iron key. "Been waiting too long." The lock clicked open with a groan. Dust billowed as the door swung inward. Inside was a narrow room lined with wooden shelves, every inch stacked with boxes. A filing cabinet rusted in the corner. Cobwebs clung like curtains. Maya raised her phone flashlight, her breath catching. She lifted the lid of the nearest box. Inside were leather-bound notebooks, yellowed photographs, and neatly folded letters. Each labeled with a name. "These," Mr. Dorsey whispered, "are records the black staff kept during segregation years. Not official archives. Their own." Maya pulled out a notebook. The handwriting was small but clear. April 3rd, 1950. "Agnes Cooper, housekeeper. They say I can't eat at the same table, but I know this school better than they ever will." Another entry read, "James Alton, grounds crew. Paid 42 cents an hour. Denied entry to the chapel." Maya's chest tightened. Her eyes burned. "They kept their own history," she murmured. "They knew nobody else would," Mr. Dorsey said softly. Over the next week, Maya, Ellie, and Simone cataloged the materials. They spent long evenings surrounded by dust and whispers of the past, fingers black with age-old ink. They found love letters between staff forbidden to marry on campus grounds. Complaint letters never answered. Sketches of the academy drawn by a janitor's son. Visions of halls filled with faces that looked like his. Each discovery was a wound and a gift. Maya proposed expanding the project, a new exhibit called Beneath the Floorboards, a living archive that told the truth Redwood had tried to bury. When she pitched it to the administration, Harrow sat stone-faced at the head of the table. "You are proposing," he said finally, "that we reveal Redwood knowingly suppressed these records." "I'm proposing," Maya replied, her voice steady, "that we tell the truth." The silence stretched. At last, Harrow said coldly, "I will not stop this, but I will not endorse it either." "That's enough," Maya said. "We don't need permission to remember." The exhibit launched in late May in the East Gallery. Students, teachers, alumni, even retired staff crowded the room. Daniel stood at the back in his uniform, his eyes glistening. Maya stood at the podium with one of the old notebooks in her hand. "I found these stories beneath dust and silence," she said, "but they were never gone. They waited, waiting for someone to care enough to listen." She opened to a page and read aloud. May 12, 1949. Ruth Ellis, cook. "They let me feed the students but not eat beside them. One day someone will say my name." Maya closed the book. Her voice trembled, then steadied. "Ruth, we are saying it now." The room erupted in applause. Not loud, but full. A kind of sound that said, "We see you now." After the crowd thinned, Harrow approached. His face was pale, his jaw tight. "I underestimated you," he said flatly. Maya met his eyes. "No, you underestimated the power of truth." He said nothing. For the first time, his silence was not dismissal. It was defeat. A week later, an invitation arrived from the National Education Alliance. Maya, the letter read, "We wish to create a traveling version of Beneath the Floorboards, beginning with a summer launch in Chicago. We would like you to curate, speak, and lead workshops. Your story has the power to change more than a school. It can change a nation." Maya read the letter 3 times before she let herself breathe. Her voice had begun at the gate of Redwood. Now it was echoing far beyond its walls. But before she could leave, Redwood demanded one more fight. At the year-end board meeting, Harrow called Maya into his office. Rivera was there too, arms folded, eyes watchful. "Miss Coleman," Harrow began, "we've reviewed the national invitation." Maya nodded. "And?" Harrow's voice was smooth but strained. "We must consider the reputation of this institution. National attention may cast Redwood in a light some donors find unfavorable." Maya tilted her head. "Unfavorable because it's honest?" Harrow's jaw clenched. "If you wish to remain here, you must understand the limits of influence." Maya leaned forward, her voice low but firm. "Respectfully, sir, if you think this is the end of my influence, then you haven't been listening." For once, Harrow blinked. Rivera spoke into the silence. "She isn't diminishing Redwood, Principal Harrow. She's saving it." Maya rose, gathering her notebook. "I won't stop speaking. Calmly, truthfully, with purpose. You can either support that, or be remembered for resisting it." She left without waiting for dismissal. That night, back at the duplex, Daniel grilled sandwiches while humming to a Marvin Gaye record. Maya sat at the kitchen table rereading the letter from Chicago. "Dad," she said softly, "what if this keeps going?" Daniel slid a sandwich onto her plate, his smile faint but certain. "Then keep going with it. And if it gets harder?" He set down the spatula, his eyes warm and unshakable. "Then it's probably worth doing." Maya folded the letter slowly, holding it like it was more than paper. Because it wasn't just paper. It was a door. And she had already learned how to walk through. Chapter 9. The Headmaster's Award. June arrived draped in golden light. The lawns of Redwood Academy glowed emerald, and the ivy along its stone walls thickened in a summer rush. Students buzzed with the familiar frenzy of finals, graduation rehearsals, and whispered summer plans. For Maya, the rhythm felt unreal. She had spent the year carrying weight heavier than grades, heavier than tests. She had walked through silence, through sneers, through doors that were never meant to open for her. And now she walked with purpose, books tucked to her chest like shields. She thought the year was winding down quietly. She thought she had finally earned stillness. But Redwood had one more surprise. The Honors Assembly was Redwood's grandest tradition. Every June, students and families gathered in the cavernous auditorium beneath banners of gold and white. Parents filled the back rows, Teachers lined the aisles, and students polished their shoes until they gleamed like mirrors. Maya sat near the front, not by choice, but by obligation. Her name had already been printed in the program under Civic Voice Award. She expected polite applause, nothing more. Daniel sat behind her, wearing his best jacket, his work boots scrubbed until the leather shone. His pride filled the space between them like sunlight. The ceremony rolled forward with its usual rhythm: academic awards, debate trophies, sports accolades. Names called, applause rippling, polite smiles exchanged. But when Principal Harrow stepped to the podium for the final announcement, the room shifted. The air grew taut. "Each year," Harrow said, his voice formal, "we reserve the final moment of this assembly for the Headmaster's Award, the most prestigious honor our academy bestows. This award is not simply for achievement. It is for leadership, service, and the embodiment of Redwood's spirit." Maya's gaze drifted to the stage lights. She had seen this award go to legacy students, student body presidents, children of donors. It was never meant for her. Harrow continued, his voice carrying with practiced gravity. "This year, the committee received nominations from across departments, faculty, students, even alumni, and though we debated, one name repeated again and again." A pause. The screen behind him flickered on. Maya's photograph appeared, her standing in front of the Beneath the Floorboards exhibit, notebook in hand, her face calm and fierce. A collective gasp rippled through the auditorium. Maya's heart thudded. "Miss Maya Coleman," Harrow said, "please join me on stage." For a moment, Maya didn't move. Her body refused. Then Ellie's hand nudged her from the side. Simone's whisper carried like a thread. "Go." She rose, legs trembling, and walked toward the stage. The applause swelled. Not polite, not obligatory, but real. When she reached the podium, Harrow held out the plaque. "In my time as principal," he said, "I have rarely witnessed such a transformation, not just in a student, but in a school. Miss Coleman's advocacy has challenged us, pushed us, and reminded us that tradition is only honorable when it evolves." He placed the plaque in her hands. The engraved letters blurred before her eyes. Maya Coleman, 2025 Headmaster's Award for Courage, Truth, and Legacy. The weight of it pressed into her palms. Not heavy. Solid. She turned to the microphone. "I wasn't supposed to be here," Maya began, her voice steady. "Not just on this stage, but in this building. Some of you remember the day I was almost turned away. I do. I remember every word." The room stilled. Even the air seemed to hold its breath. "But I also remember what happened after. I remember those who listened, those who stood beside me, and those who changed, even when it was hard." She scanned the crowd. Students leaned forward. Teachers stared. "This award isn't just about me," Maya said. "It's about everyone who was told they didn't belong, and showed up anyway. It's about telling the truth, even when your voice shakes. It's about remembering the names that history forgot, and making sure no one else gets erased." Her eyes landed briefly on Harrow. "This school is not perfect," she said, her voice firm, "but it is learning, and that matters." The applause erupted like thunder. Students rose to their feet, some teachers clapped, some parents wiped tears, and in the back, Daniel clapped louder than them all. Afterward, outside the auditorium, Daniel waited by his old truck with a bouquet of sunflowers in his hands. "You," he said, pulling her into a hug, "just rewrote the ending of a very old story." Maya buried her face against his shoulder. "I didn't expect it." "That's what makes it matter," he whispered. That evening, the award sat on their kitchen table. Maya turned it over in her hands again and again, running her thumb along the engraved letters. Then she noticed something taped to the back. A folded note, handwritten in slanted script. "Justice doesn't knock. It waits, and you open the door. Thank you." No name. No signature. She folded it carefully and tucked it into her notebook beside her mother's journal. The next week, Redwood began preparing for graduation. The air buzzed with farewells and last-minute essays. Students signed yearbooks in crowded hallways, laughter echoing like relief. But for Maya, quiet moments carried the most weight. Sitting beneath the old maple tree where she had once cried on her first day. Walking past the gates her father had once guarded, now carrying her with pride. Standing in the portrait hall where her mother's name gleamed in brass. She had entered Redwood as the gatekeeper's daughter. She was leaving as the school's conscience. And as she packed the last of her books into her bag, tucking her mother's scarf around the edges, She realized something. She hadn't just survived Redwood. She had changed it. Chapter 10. Voices Yet to Come. The final days of the school year carried a strange hush. The air was warm, filled with the scent of cut grass and blooming roses. But Redwood Academy felt different. Quieter, almost reverent. Students moved through the halls with less mockery, more watchful glances. Teachers nodded at Maya in ways that were small but new. For Maya, every step felt like both an ending and a beginning. One afternoon, she returned to the East Gallery. The Beneath the Floorboards exhibit stretched across the walls, photographs and plaques glinting beneath soft light. Students passed slowly, reading, whispering. At the center, nestled between a cook and a groundskeeper, was the newest plaque. Lena Johnson, Archivist of Hope. Beside it, etched in brass, was her mother's journal line. I sweep these floors not for glory, but in the hope that one day my daughter might walk them with her head held high. Maya stood frozen, her throat tight, fingers brushing the cool metal letters. She hadn't known Rivera planned to add it. It was a gift, a surprise that felt like a homecoming. Behind her, soft footsteps. Daniel. His cap in hand, his uniform still dusted from the day. His eyes shimmered as he looked at the plaque. She made it, he whispered. She always did, Maya said. They stood there together, father and daughter, before the name of the woman who had given them both strength. Graduation week arrived. Students in crisp caps and gowns filled the quad, laughter ringing out like bells. Yearbooks passed from hand to hand. Maya packed her dorm room slowly, folding her thrifted clothes into a small suitcase, tucking away the notebooks that had carried her through. She slipped her mother's scarf around one strap, her father's old pocket knife into the side pocket. When she was done, she looked around the empty room. Once it had felt like a cell. Now it felt like a chapter finished. On her last day, she was summoned to the administration office. Principal Harrow was there, his hands clasped tightly, his expression unreadable. Rivera sat beside him, her gaze steady. A few board members lined the far wall, awkward in their silence. Maya, Harrow began, before you leave, we wanted to extend a gesture. Maya folded her arms cautiously. We've created a fellowship in your name, Rivera said, stepping forward. The Maya Coleman Fellowship for Educational Equity. It will fund a full scholarship each year for a student from a working-class family with an interest in leadership and advocacy. Maya's jaw tightened. That's good, she said slowly, as long as it's not just a plaque for a brochure. It's not, Rivera assured her. It's a seed. Maya exhaled, then nodded once. Then thank you for choosing to plant it. Outside, Ellie and Simone were waiting. You're famous now, Ellie teased, waving her phone. You're trending again, Maya groaned. Let me disappear for a week, please. Simone laughed. You can't, not when Chicago is waiting. Maya smiled faintly. It's not the end. No, Ellie said, grinning. It's just a different kind of beginning. That evening, under the old maple tree, students, staff, and alumni gathered one last time. They brought food, music, and stories. No speeches, just joy. Maya sat cross-legged in the grass, her notebook open in her lap. She flipped to the last page of her mother's journal, where a blank space had always waited. She wrote, You were right, Mama. I walked with my head high. And now others will too. She closed the book gently, her hand resting on the cover. The next morning, Maya left Redwood for the last time. Her suitcase bumped against the steps as she walked. The gates stood tall and silent. Once, they had felt like barriers. Now they felt like doors. Daniel walked beside her, his hand brushing her shoulder. They didn't speak as they passed through, but the silence was full. Not of doubt, but of promise. The gates closed softly behind them. Maya stepped forward into the world that now knew her name, and the names of those who came before. Because she had learned that history is not only remembered, it is rewritten, one voice at a time. Epilogue. Chicago. The summer sun shimmered over the city skyline. In a gallery filled with light, the Beneath the Floorboards exhibit opened to the public for the first time outside Redwood. Visitors moved slowly, whispering, reading, pausing. Maya stood near the entrance, wearing her navy dress, her braids tied back. She watched as children pressed their hands against the glass that held old photographs, as teachers scribbled notes, as parents wiped quiet tears. When she stepped to the podium, the room fell silent. These stories, she said, were once hidden in dust, but they never disappeared. They waited. For us. For you. for the voices yet to come. Applause rose, soft but real, and Maya knew. Her mother's hope had become her own, and her voice was no longer just an echo inside old walls. It was a call that would carry forward, louder, stronger, unstoppable. Follow my channel to discover more interesting stories. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss out on the next interesting content. Thank you for listening.